So my name is Mary Sherman, and I'm with the Faculty and Employee Assistance Program. Hopefully everybody has all the handouts and a brochure about our group too. Just quickly, the Faculty Employee Assistance Program is a free confidential program available to all employees and family members. We help with any kind of personal workplace issue. Okay, we do a lot of work around happiness and engagement and all that kind of stuff. What you might not be aware of is we have an elder care consultant on staff, we have a legal access program, we have a financial consultant on staff. So a lot of great programs for you guys. It's free and confidential, okay? So just to be aware of that. So today we are going to be talking about the 5 keys to happiness. Who is already on their way this morning? Yes? Did anybody do laughter yoga? I see a couple of faces. I was very sad I had to leave a little early to come get ready for this, right? But so I didn't get to lay down belly laugh. How was that? Was that? Very good. All right. So what we're going to be talking about today is there is so much great information that's going on out there. Maybe if you went to EBT, the emotional brain training, you heard a little bit about this too. But so what's happening in terms of positive psychology is that they are finding that there are different things that we can do with the brain that can help to wire us for happiness. Okay, so we want to be able to share that information and take advantage of it, because I think probably everybody would agree. Who would like to be even more happy? Yeah? All right. All right, we're going to do it today. So this is, and if you've seen it before, that's okay. What I found out is you have to be exposed to something 6 times before it kind of sinks in. That's okay, you can hear it again. This is Sean Aker. Sean Aker is from Harvard, and he taught one of the most popular classes in Harvard's history, their happiness course, okay? He also wrote a book called The Happiness Advantage, and this talk is really revolutionary. What I love about it is, 1, it's humorous. 2, it puts forth a reframe of how we look at happiness and success, which is crucial if you want to be able to maintain long-term happiness, okay? So the reframe that he puts out there is just absolutely crucial. And he gives us some concrete ways to help start making that happen today, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to cut to his video, and then we're going to talk about those ways specifically that you can start bringing happiness into your life, okay?
When I was 7 years old and my sister was just 5 years old, we were playing on top of a bunk bed. I was 2 years older than my sister at the time. I mean, I'm 2 years older than her now, but at the time that meant she had to do everything that I wanted to do, and I wanted to play war. So we were up on top of our bunk beds, and on one side of the bunk bed I had put out all my G.I. Joe soldiers and weaponry, and on the other side were all my sister's Milos and ponies and ready for a cavalry charge. There are differing accounts of what actually happened that afternoon, but since my sister is not here with us today, let me tell you the true story. Which is, my sister is a little bit on the clumsy side, and somehow, without any help or push from her older brother at all, suddenly Amy disappeared off of the top of the bunk bed and landed with this crash on the floor. And I nervously peered over the side of the bed to see what had befallen my fallen sister, and saw that she had landed painfully on her hands and knees on all 4s on the ground. I was nervous because my parents had charged me with making sure that my sister and I played as safely and as quietly as possible. And seeing as how I had accidentally broken Amy's arm just 1 week before, heroically pushing her out of the way of an oncoming imaginary sniper bullet, for which I have yet to be thanked. I was trying as hard as I could. She didn't even see it coming. I was trying as hard as I could to be on my best behavior, and I saw my sister's face this wail of pain and suffering and surprise, threatening to erupt from her mouth and threatening to wake my parents from the long winter's nap for which they had settled. So I did the only thing my little frantic 7-year-old brain could think to do to avert this tragedy. If you have children, you've seen this hundreds of times before. I said, Amy, wait, don't cry, don't cry. Did you see how you landed? No human lands on all 4s like that. Amy, I think this means you're a unicorn. Now that was cheating because there's nothing in the world my sister would want more than not to be Amy the hurt 5-year-old little sister, but Amy the special unicorn. Of course, this was an option that was open to her brain at no point in the past. And you could see on my poor, manipulated sister's face conflict. As her little brain attempted to devote resources to feeling the pain and suffering surprise she just experienced, or contemplating her newfound identity as a unicorn. And the latter won out. Instead of crying, instead of ceasing our play, instead of waking my parents with all the negative consequences that would have ensued for me, instead, a smile spread across her face, and she scrambled right back up onto the bunk bed with all the grace of a baby unicorn. With one broken leg. What we stumbled across at this tender age of just 5 and 7, we had no idea at the time, was something that was going to be at the vanguard of a scientific revolution occurring 2 decades later in the way that we look at the human brain. What we had stumbled across is something called positive psychology, which is the reason that I'm here today and the reason that I wake up every morning. When I first started talking about this research outside of academia, out with companies and schools, the very first thing they said to never do is to start your talk with a graph. The very first thing I wanted to do is start my talk with a graph. This graph looks boring, but this graph is the reason that I get excited and wake up every morning. And this graph doesn't even mean anything. It's fake data. What we found is if I got this data back studying you here in the room, I would be thrilled because there's very clearly a trend that's going on there, and that means that I can get published, which is all that really matters. The fact that there's one weird red dot that's up above the curve, there's one weird in the room, you know who you are, I saw you earlier. That's no problem. That's no problem, as most of you know, because I can just delete that dot. I can delete that dot because that's clearly a measurement error, and we know that's a measurement error because it's messing up my data. So one of the very first things that we teach people in economics and statistics and business and psychology courses is how, in a statistically valid way, do we eliminate the weirdos? How do we eliminate the outliers? So that we can find the line of best fit, which is fantastic if I'm trying to find out how many Advil the average person should be taking, too. But if I'm interested in potential, if I'm interested in your potential, or for happiness, or productivity, or energy, or creativity, what we're doing is we're creating the cult of the average with science. If I ask a question like, how fast can a child learn how to read in a classroom? Scientists change the answer to, how fast does the average child learn how to read in that classroom? And then we tailor the class right towards the average. Now, if you fall below the average on this curve, then psychologists get thrilled. Because that means you're either depressed, or you have a disorder, or hopefully both. We're hoping for both because our business model is if you come into a therapy session with one problem, we want to make sure you leave knowing you have 10. So you'll keep coming back over and over again. We'll go back into your childhood if necessary, but eventually what we want to do is to make you normal again. But normal is merely average. And what I posit, and what positive psychology posits, is that if we study what is merely average, we will remain merely average. Then instead of deleting those positive outliers, what I intentionally do is come into a population like this one and says, why? Why is it that some of you are so high above the curve in terms of your intellectual ability, athletic ability, musical ability, creativity, energy levels, your resiliency in the face of challenge, your sense of humor? Whatever it is, instead of deleting you, what I want to do is study you. Because maybe we can glean information, not just how to move people up to the average, but how we can move the entire average up at our companies and schools worldwide. The reason this graph is important to me is when I turn on the news, it seems like the majority of the information is not positive. In fact, it's negative. Most of it's about murder, corruption, diseases, natural disasters, and very quickly, my brain starts to think that's the accurate ratio of negative to positive in the world. What that's doing is creating something called the medical school syndrome, which if you know people who have been to medical school during the first year of medical training, as you read through a list of all the symptoms and diseases that could happen, suddenly you realize you have all of them. I have a brother-in-law named Bobo, which is a whole other story. Bobo married Amy the unicorn. Bobo called me on the phone from Yale Medical School. And Bobo said, Sean, I have leprosy. Which even at Yale is extraordinarily rare. But I had no idea how to console poor Bobo because he had just gotten over an entire week of menopause. See, what we're finding is not necessarily the reality that shapes us, but the lens through which your brain views the world that shapes your reality. And if we can change the lens, not only can we change your happiness, we can change every single educational and business outcome at the same time. When I applied to Harvard, I applied on a dare. I didn't expect to get in, and my family had no money for college. When I got a military scholarship 2 weeks later that allowed me to go, suddenly something that wasn't even a possibility became a reality. When I went there, I assumed everyone else would see it as a privilege as well, that they'd be excited to be there. Even if you're in a classroom full of people smarter than you, you'd be happy just to be in that classroom, which is what I felt. But what I found there is while some people experienced that, when I graduated after my 4 years and then spent the next 8 years living in the dorms with the students, Harvard asked me to. Wasn't that guy. But what happened... I was an officer of Harvard to counsel students through the difficult 4 years, and what I found in my research and my teaching is that these students, no matter how happy they were with their original success of getting into the school, 2 weeks later, their brains were focused not on the privilege of being there, nor on their philosophy or their physics. Their brain was focused on the competition, the workload, the hassles, the stresses, the complaints. When I first went in there, I walked into the freshman dining hall, which is where my friends from Waco, Texas, which is where I grew up, I know some of you have heard of it. When they come to visit me, they look around, they say, this freshman dining hall looks like something out of Hogwarts from the movie Harry Potter, which it does. This is Hogwarts from the movie Harry Potter, and that's Harvard. And when they see this, they say, Sean, why do you waste your time studying happiness at Harvard? Seriously, what does a Harvard student possibly have to be unhappy about? Embedded within that question is the key to understanding the science of happiness. Because what that question assumes is that our external world is predictive of our happiness levels. When in reality, if I know everything about your external world, I can only predict 10% of your long-term happiness. 90% of your long-term happiness is predicted not by the external world, but by the way your brain processes the world. And if we change it, if we change our formula for happiness and success, what we can do is change the way that we can then affect reality. What we found is that only 25% of job successes are predicted by IQ. 75% of job successes are predicted by your optimism levels, your social support, and your ability to see stress as a challenge instead of as a threat. I talked to a boarding school up in New England, probably the most prestigious boarding school, and they said, we already know that. So every year, instead of just teaching our students, we also have a wellness week, and we're so excited. Monday night, we have the world's leading expert coming in to speak about adolescent depression. Tuesday night is school violence and bullying. Wednesday night is eating disorders. Thursday night is illicit drug use. And Friday night, we're trying to decide between risky sex or happiness. I said, that's most people's Friday nights. Which I'm glad you liked, but they did not like that at all. Silence on the phone. And into the silence, I said, I'd be happy to speak at your school, but just so you know, that's not a wellness week, that's a sickness week. What you've done is you've outlined all the negative things that can happen, but not talked about the positive. The absence of disease is not health. Here's how we get to health. We need to reverse the formula for happiness and success. In the past 3 years, I've traveled to 45 different countries, working with schools and companies in the midst of an economic downturn. And what I found is that most companies and schools follow a formula for success, which is this: if I work harder, I'll be more successful. And if I'm more successful, then I'll be happier. That undergirds most of our parenting styles, our managing styles, the way that we motivate our behavior. And the problem is, it's scientifically broken and backwards for 2 reasons. First, every time your brain has a success, you just change the goalpost of what success looked like. You got good grades, now you have to get better grades. You got into a good school, now you have to get a better school. You got a good job, now you have to get a better job. You hit your sales target, we're going to change your sales target. And if happiness is on the opposite side of success, your brain never gets there. What we've done is we've pushed happiness over the cognitive horizon as a society. And that's because we think we have to be successful, then we'll be happier. But the real problem is our brains work in the opposite order. If you can raise somebody's level of positivity in the present, then their brain experiences what we now call a happiness advantage, which is your brain at positive performs significantly better than it does at negative, neutral, or stressed. Your intelligence rises, your creativity rises, your energy levels rise. In fact, what we found is that every single business outcome improves. Your brain at positive is 31% more productive than your brain at negative, neutral, or stressed. You're 37% better at sales. Doctors are 19% faster, more accurate at coming up with the correct diagnosis when positive instead of negative, neutral, or stressed, which means we can reverse the formula. If we can find a way of becoming positive in the present, then our brains work even more successfully as we're able to work harder, faster, and more intelligently. What we need to be able to do is to reverse this formula so we can start to see what our brains are actually capable of. Because dopamine, which floods into your system when you're positive, has 2 functions. Not only does it make you happier, it turns on all the learning centers in your brain, allowing you to adapt to the world in a different way. We've found that there are ways that you can train your brain to be able to become more positive. In just a 2-minute span of time, done for 21 days in a row, we can actually rewire your brain, allowing your brain to actually work more optimistically and more successfully. We've done these things in research now in every single company that I've worked with, getting them to write down 3 new things that they're grateful for 21 days in a row, 3 new things each day. And at the end of that, their brain starts to retain a pattern of scanning the world not for the negative, but for the positive first. Journaling about one positive experience you've had over the past 24 hours allows your brain to relive it. Exercise teaches your brain that your behavior matters. We find that meditation allows your brain to get over the cultural ADHD that we've been creating by trying to do multiple tasks at once, and allows our brains to focus on the task at hand. And finally, random acts of kindness or conscious acts of kindness. We get people, when they open up their inbox, to write one positive email praising or thanking somebody in their social support network. And by doing these activities and by training your brain, just like we train our bodies, what we found is we can reverse the formula for happiness and success, and in doing so, not only create ripples of positivity, but create a real revolution. Thank you very much.
So what we did this before in May. We did what we call the Happiness Challenge, and we took those 5 pieces and we taught people about those, and then we created your other sheet that you have there, and on the back of it you have a checklist that you can go off of. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk in depth about each one, and if you want to, you can take the Happiness Challenge, and it just gives you an easy way to do that, okay? So the first one we're going to talk about is gratitudes. So what he's talking about here is if you do 3 new gratitudes each day, okay, they have to have happened within the last 24 hours, and you need to say why, okay? So I do this with my children at home at bedtime. It's a great way to kind of reframe and be in a good space as they're going to bed. And it can be challenging for people to be like, something new, especially if we're in a more negative space or we tend to run on that negative side. And I had a client the other day that I was working with, and she was like, so I saw, a sunset or a sunrise in the morning. So she's like, so do I have to start looking from the time I go out into the car? And I'm like, yes, that's it, bingo. You are going to be looking all day. So what did Brian talk about? What we look for, we are going to find. So if you are looking all day at what you're grateful for, and so you are going to find that. And how are we going to feel if what we're experiencing is what things we're thankful for? How are we going to feel? Yeah, positive, good, right? Versus focusing on what we don't have, what's not going right, all those things, okay? And a caveat in all of this talk about happiness does not mean that we don't have negative emotions. Okay? It's very detrimental to you to act like something that is negative isn't negative. Okay? So like a grieving process. We always make sure that we have a healthy space to express those negative emotions, but what we do is we express it, then we let it go, and we come back to the positive center. Okay? Because if we don't express it, it can build up in us and create depression, anxiety, physical illness, all those kinds of things, okay? So this is not saying we're smiling 24/7, right? That's not what this is about. But it's saying that we want to wire ourselves to have that positive center that we're living in more often than not, okay? So what I want you guys to do is at your tables is just to share a gratitude or two that you have from the last 24 hours, and why, okay? So just take a moment among yourselves. You can do it however you want, either 2s or 3s or 4s, however you want to do it. How did that feel? Can somebody share one of their gratitudes? It made you have to think, right? Right? It made you look at things in a different way, right? Yeah, can somebody share one of their gratitudes? Yeah, you walked to work today.
45-minute walk.
Great, that's great. Yay, round of applause. Awesome. Okay. All right, anybody else? What about here?
I got to be a Santa to a senior finally yesterday, so I was happy. Is that right?
Great, so you got to give to others and be a Santa to a senior, she said.
Been wanting to do that.
And so did you actually get to give it to them and see there? And how did they respond?
It was great. Made me feel great, and they were feeling good. And I got to wrap, but I got to deliver. So that was,
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, in this time of season, really, from the Dalai Lama's perspective, giving to others is one of those gateways to happiness. And that's what they say in kind of the happiness research is if you want a quick boost, do something for somebody else. So, all right, great. So just think about, ways that you can integrate that into your day. So again, I do it at bedtime. So what they found, if you do it with your significant other, if you have one, is that it increases the positive feelings in the relationship. And after 6 months of doing it, they actually rate you as more physically attractive. Right? We could all use a little bit more of that, right? Some people are like, I'm already physically attractive enough to my mate. I don't need any more of that. But so just understanding that it's not only for your benefit. Anytime you do any of these things, there is a ripple effect. Yes?
Is it something that you have to express to someone else as opposed to just internally, saying, I'm grateful for this?
So you can write it down if you want to. You could do it with somebody else. However it works for you, as long as your brain is taking the time to register it, but it has to be new in the last 24 hours, and you need to say why, okay? So you can do it however you want. Journaling it is a solitary event. We got dinner table conversation, what are we grateful for? What a great thing, especially if you have adolescent children or things like that, that's helping them to wire their brain for happiness, okay? So that's the first one. The next one that he talked about is journaling, the best part of my day. So what's interesting is journaling seems to be the most difficult thing for people to do. And I think that's because of school. I blame school, right? We all started hating writing because we had to write papers and all these things. And it was just not fun, right? But it is actually one of the most powerful things that you can do, okay? So if you can kind of get over the hurdle, create a nice, pretty journal for yourself. So I was meeting with someone the other day, and she just had the most amazing journal because we're doing these things with her, and she writes, her gratitudes in there. But she also put like pictures and like if she'd gone somewhere, cut out something from there, glued it in. She would draw from there too, like pictures of a tree or different things like that. And she's not an artist by any stretch, but that just gives her also a visual cue as she kind of looks back through it. Okay. So that was just something, and then it was funny, what she had done was, because she hadn't reached a goal that she got an ugly journal to write in. And we were like, there's so much joy she was getting from the other one, she hadn't even realized, kind of what was going on. So she switched, she was going right after the session to go get a nice pretty journal so she could get back into it, okay? So the best part of your day. Another way to do this, so if that's too hard, is to verbally say it, to say, again, great dinner conversation. Hey, what was the best part of your day? And what people will find will be like, I found out information that I wouldn't have normally found out, okay? And even if somebody had a challenging day, they might be like, oh, well, yeah, there was this great thing that happened, so maybe it wasn't all a challenging day, okay? So just think about how you might be able to integrate that into your life. Because again, if we're thinking about what was my best part of the day, I know I need to check in with it, our brain is going to be wired for it, okay? What they find is 21 days is that habit forming. If they do a brain scan after 28 days, they can actually show the neuropathways, the new neuropathways showing up, okay? So these are simple things that we can do. Gratitude takes about 45 seconds. 45 seconds of your day, okay? So the next one he talked about was exercise. The context of this is 15 minutes of doing something that's active, okay? And so he's referencing here the study that they did in Duke where they looked at using an antidepressant only, antidepressant and exercise, and just exercise. And exercise had the biggest long-term positive effect on depression. So it is one of the panaceas out there that's non-medication that you can do that will have a positive impact on your life. So it can be gardening, it can be doing something that it can be laughter yoga, right? It can be really anything so that you're doing something that's active and physical, 15 minutes. And again, people get tied up with this, I don't have time to. But if you look at the reframe, so the reframe is what? We first need to be what? In that positive space, okay? In order for anything else to work well, right? Is that the way most people are functioning? No, absolutely not. They're doing way too much, right? And then they're exhausted. And then they're doing way too much, and what are they missing? This whole space right in here, okay? So if you want to be more productive, should you do so much that you're exhausted? Or should you take a break and figure out how to get back in here, right? So that's what you need to rewire your brain to understand that, okay? And I'm not just saying it, science proves it, right? It's not just me. We have the things. So these are, again, simple things you can do and pay attention to. If you did all of them, you know, what are we talking about? Like 20 minutes of a day. And you can spread it out throughout the entire day, okay? Right? I love this. I absolutely love this. Mindful or mindful, okay? So we have the UVA Center for Mindfulness here. On their website, they have 5 different, you can just Google it. Their domain name is like this long, so I always just say Google it. UVA Mindfulness Center. If you go to their resources and audio recordings, there's 5 different ones that are available all the time, okay? 5-minute breath work, 10-minute breath work, 10-minute loving kindness, which I highly recommend, especially if you're just getting into it, because it's guided throughout. It makes it very easy, okay? But the mindfulness is one of those things that's a gateway to coming into this space, okay? And it allows us, if we are doing it, to recenter, to have conscious choice available to us, okay? So again, if you went to the EBT training, when our brain is in those spaces above 3, she talked about these brain states, and 3 was kind of that verge of getting into the stressful response, then we're able to make the responses. We're able to respond in the way that we want to situations. The other piece of mindfulness is it's saying that we can have any emotion. We don't have to judge it, right? Are we always judging I shouldn't be feeling them, you know, all these different things that we say. Or feeling guilty, all these different things, okay? And we don't have to act on it or react to it, okay? So and it's, again, the more we practice it, the better we become. So I have a new colleague, and when I would come around, she's in the back, she would kind of like startle her response. And she would say, she does mindfulness. She's like, well, I guess this is something that tells me that I need to spend a little bit more time on my mindfulness practice. And she said they've actually done studies where they will tell people who do mindfulness and people who do not that they're going to count down from 10. And when they get to 1, they're going to hear a gunshot. And the people who do mindfulness don't have the same reaction as the people who do not do mindfulness. So really, it's, again, just like exercise, it's a prophylactic against stress, okay? And the more we do it, really, he's talking about 2 minutes. 2 minutes of breathing. We are breathing all the time anyways, hopefully. If we are not, we have bigger problems to deal with, right? Unless we're in the mountains of Peru, where we might be very hard to do. But so make sure that you are taking that time to breathe. So some people find it torturous. Really, you can look at a sunset. You can do however you want to do. Prayer. You can do it however you want to do it. Just do it, okay? So mindfulness is another great way, okay? So random acts of kindness, okay? And what he is asking for in his is just saying, before you get into your day, send one appreciative, praising email to somebody in your support network. Something positive out there to somebody in your support network, okay? So that's not a huge amount to ask for, but it can have a huge impact, not only on you, because again, we have the same example, right? You're giving something positive to somebody else. What we know in terms of happiness, our social support network is huge, okay? So this is helping to keep connected to it, okay? And it's pretty easy, right? So I had another great example with a person, she gave a thank you note to somebody that she was working with who had had a challenging time but then had gotten better. And the person came to her and said, thank you so much for this thank you note. And then she saw that they had put it up. And then they came back again and said, I can't remember if I thanked you for giving me that thank you note. From one thank you note, you know. So just a small act of kindness, one, we feel better, right? But it can make that ripple effect, okay? So it only takes 21 days to form a habit, okay? Which is not a huge amount of time, right? If we look at it, okay? So some people still say, well, I don't know that I have time for that. So I'm going to show you one more clip from Sean of one other thing that you can do in 3 seconds that can make an impact.
It has to actually be active, but when we're mindful about it, our brain changes the way our bodies respond to the world. Now, when I start talking about all these ways we could change our world, I sometimes get pushback. Some people say, Sean, I actually don't have much control over my life. You're talking about people who have time to add in the fun 15, or it could change their mindset, but look at my world right now. I can't create more happiness. I don't even have control over anything that's going on in my world. If that's what you're experiencing, I wanted to tell you about our 4th habit, because within 3 seconds, you can actually teach your brain to see how much control you actually have over your environment. It's amazing. It's called the ripple effect, and it's the most fun one of all of these, even more fun than the fun 15. And what we have you do is consciously add 3 smiles to your day. That is it. Smiles take you a second to do, and they don't even take much energy, right? It's one of the easiest things in the world for us to do, but we have to consciously add them where we wouldn't have done them otherwise. Like if you wouldn't have smiled at somebody at the supermarket, you add in that smile. You walk into an elevator, we normally are so serious in elevators, you smile at the people in the elevator. Some of them might get off, but don't worry about that. It just shows your brain you have power. But by adding those 3 smiles, what you're doing is you're flexing your smile, which actually we need to get better at. Because the more we do it, the more our brain actually will naturally do it in our world. Now here's the cool part. The ripple effect has 2 effects that occur. First of all, smiling just 3 times more raises your levels of happiness. When I was little, my grandmother used to say, fake it till you make it. Have you guys heard this before? Like if you smile, you're supposed to feel happier. Turns out scientifically, my grandmother was right. When we look at a brain scan, if we get you to smile, your brain actually starts to feel happier. In fact, our brains are so dumb that if you put a pen into your mouth sideways and bite down on it, the corners of your mouth turn up and your brain drops a chemical called dopamine into your system, which is a neurochemical related to happiness. So you feel happier just putting a pen into your mouth sideways. So if things are not going well with your spouse, just put a pen in your mouth. Now that's quick. That's a short-term gain. When I was little, if I had fallen on the ground and skinned my knee, my dad would say, Sean, I just want you to laugh that off. Which I still think is child abuse. But what he was doing, he was a neuroscientist, and he knew my brain couldn't do 2 things at once. It couldn't feel the pain at the same time my brain is smiling. And so my brain gets confused and has to pick one or the other. So when you smile, when you add those 3 smiles to your day, first of all, it changes you. But second of all, it starts to change the people around you.
So how about that? So again, even if you're thinking, well, I don't really have time for this, 3 new smiles. Okay, and I did the pen thing with my daughter. Okay, she's almost 13, and so we have some different emotions coming at us at different times. So I was like, put this pen in your mouth, and she did, and she put it in there, and then she started smiling, and then she started laughing, and then we were able to kind of move on with our day. So definitely, anybody have a pen there with you? Let's try it real quick. Right? Or your finger? Right? Okay, and keep it in there for like a minute. Let the dopamine kind of drop down in you. Okay, so just the brain can only do one thing at a time. Okay, so if we want to be negative, it's going to go negative. If we're going to prime the positive pump and wire it for that, it's going to do that. So the last thing I want you to think about and talk about at your tables, and we're going to be wrapping up here, is if I wanted to try, and just try one thing, 3 new smiles, 3 new gratitudes. If you want to do it all, great. I won't stop you, as many as you want to add in. But talk about what could make this easier for me to be successful in trying one of these things for 21 days, okay? So go ahead and do that, and then we're going to be wrapping up, and people are going to be coming in. So just take a few minutes to talk about that. What can make that easy? Great. All right. Well, hopefully this has been helpful to kind of reframe your thinking about recognizing you need to put yourself in a positive space first, okay, in order for happiness to come. These are some different resources that are also on there. And you've gotten a sampling of a lot of different things that you can try. that can be your fun 15 or your meditation or different things like that. So hopefully you can engage in that and enjoy the rest of your day. We're almost